It's the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 28, looking at the groups and teams of the 2024 Copa America. This episode is looking at the players of Ecuador. Here we go! Hello and welcome again to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and we continue Series 28 on the groups and players of the 2024 Copa America. This episode covers Ecuador's players. In fact, it's part 2 of the players media cast, and here we look at the selections. In part 1, we made a list of the candidates and introduced them and their likelihood of making the squad. And there is a link to that, part 1, in the show notes. This episode, part 2, will be divided into 3 sections. In section 1, we'll take a quick look at their preliminary squad and their warm-up games. In section 2, the main part of the media cast, we're going to look over the list that we compiled in part 1 to see who made it and who didn't. And in section 3, we will summarize surprises in the selections, review injuries, and yes, that's what we'll do. So let's begin then. Section 1, just a quick preliminary section on information on the preliminary squad. So Ecuador didn't put out a preliminary squad. They just put out a 26-man final roster. That was published on May 29th there. And so there we have it. No preliminary squad, just the final squad of 26 players. So no cuts and no late replacements either for Ecuador. Pretty straightforward. Warm-up games, a little less straightforward. They had 3 of them. Most teams had 2. All of these were played in the USA, so they were warming up to playing there as well. The first one, June 6th, was a tough one against Argentina. Secondly, they played Bolivia, and then the last one, June 16th, was against Honduras. The second game there on June 12th, by the way. Let's take a look at the lineups in that games, because really that's our purpose. We don't really care about the scores. And what I think I see here is kind of game 1 against Argentina and game 3 against Honduras, pretty close to the starting lineup that it looks like they will use. Game 2, some of those players are there, but it seems more like the B team, the backup, except for a few positions which confuse things. So a lot of players, the starters, we think played in game 1 and 3, and then maybe some unknown positions. We do see some of the players starting games 2 and 3 there. So particularly if they started game 3, we're going to use that to make presumptions about their starting lineup, and we'll do that as we go through. Let's move on to section 2 here and going over the candidates. So manager Felix Sanchez, not dismissed or anything before the cup, so we will consider him a selection. Let's go on to goalkeepers, and we had 2 likely candidates, Alexander Dominguez and Hernan Galindez, both of those selected for the squad. We had a bit of a struggle with the third place, though. Kind of newcomer Javier Buray we saw as a possible candidate, and Moises Ramirez as possible but unlikely, based mostly on recent participation. It turns out that Ramirez, the possible but unlikely candidate, was selected ahead of Buray there. And we won't trouble ourselves with players below the possible but unlikely level. So there are our 3 goalkeepers: Alexander Dominguez, Hernan Galindez, Moises Ramirez. And let's look at the warm-up games to see if we get any hints as to who the starter will be. It was Galindez in game 1, but Dominguez in games 2 and 3. When we, at the end of part 1, went through the squad to try to determine starters, we couldn't really decide between Galindez and Dominguez. And we don't really get a strong hint here, maybe a slight hint that it's Dominguez, given that he started game 3, but that's all speculation. We would lean towards Dominguez at this point, but with no great confidence. Let's go on to the defenders. And we had, central defenders, I should say. And we had two definite candidates in Felix Torres and William Pacho. I live in constant fear that I'm pronouncing that name terribly wrong. I have to listen to announcers during the cup, but sometimes they have English announcers who pronounce it wrong too, so I'm never sure. Anyway, both of those, Torres and Pacho, made it. Our likely candidate, Piero Hincapié, also selected. And our possible candidates, two possible candidates, Robert Arboleda and Leonardo Realpe, neither of those making it. And it looks like I forgot to put Realpe on the list there, but he was on our list. However, we have two of the players below that level, below the possible level, who did make it. One is Joel Ordonez, the possible but unlikely candidate. We had him as unlikely because he had... we should have maybe had him as possible. He started the second last game there in March 2024, and he had been on the bench for 5 games and not selected for 6. But that he appeared at the end should have had us seeing him as a possible candidate. So anyway, Joel Ordonez selected for the squad, maybe not as much a surprise as we thought, but this one is a surprise. Jackson Pozzoro, we had put him in the seemingly off the squad section because he had last appeared for the team in the 2022 World Cup there in Ecuador. So we didn't really give a bio on him. So we'll do that now. Jackson Pozzoro is 24 years old and has been with the team since 2019. He has 7 caps. He might have picked up 1 or 2 more in those warm-up games there. Pozzoro plays for Troyes in France, but he's on loan to Kasimpasa in Turkey since 2024, and he was on loan to Olympiacos before that. So fairly good clubs there. He was with Boa Vista in Portugal too. Made the preliminary squad for the 2019 Copa America Pozzoro, but not the 2021 Copa America. And by the way, he didn't make the final cut in 2019. So the World Cup was his first tournament. He was basically a sub, but he did start and finish game 2 there. In the World Cup. So Jackson Pozzoro back in action for the squad. We're only going to give those details on players we didn't cover in part 1. And we do have a new candidate here, and that is Andre Micolta. So I think we did say they seemed a bit short on candidates in central defense. I can't remember, but anyway, bringing players in from the cold and bringing in new players. So Andres Micolta, brand new to the squad. He got his first appearance in the warm-up games, didn't start either or didn't start any of those 3 games, but was subbed in for 1. So he plays for Pachuca in Mexico, Andres Micolta, and yes, probably will be a bench player here, but there we have it. So 6 central defenders. Let's look at the warm-up games to see if we can discern anything. And we can, really. They have Torres and Pacho as the starting pair in the first and third game. That's who we predicted as being the starters. We were more confident about Torres than Pacho. In the second game, it was Ordonez and Pozzoro starting those 2 games. So maybe just giving them some field time is what I imagine, because they were the possible but unlikely and the seemingly off the squad candidates. All right, so we're still going to go with Torres and Pacho as the starting pair. A little more confident in Pacho than we were in part 1. Let's move on to the left back position. And here we have kind of the worst news for Ecuador. It's Pervis Estupinan, didn't recover from his injury, so was not selected. And we'll review that injury at the end, but we did know that it was a possibility. We noted in the original, in part one of the podcast, that even though Annabelle Chala, the possible candidate here, would seem to be the backup, he didn't play any of the games as as a left back. So they were using central defenders to come across and play the position. So it's no surprise that they did add a new candidate here, and it's Leanne Lure. And by the way, they didn't choose Annabelle Chala, and they didn't choose either of our possible but unlikely candidates either, Joanna Chavez or Beto Cachedo. So bringing in a new player here, but I imagine it's going to be a central defender playing the role. Anyway, the new candidate, Leanne Lure, is 21 years old. He got his first appearance in June in the warm-up games. He did start one game and was on the bench for the two others, and he plays in Ecuador for Universidad Católica. So Leanne Lure coming in, and I think as the backup. Let's look at the warm-up games and see. And yeah, we see in game one that it's central defender Hincapi moving across. That's what they did in the games previous. Not necessarily Hincapi, but a central defender playing the role. But we do see Lure in the second game, which looks more like a B team game, starting in that one. So it looks like he's going to be the backup, and Hincapi is going to be the starter on the left. Okay, let's move over to the right side, and we had a definite candidate in Angelo Preciado and a likely candidate in Jose Hurtado. Both of those players were selected for the squad. And that's all we have on this side. So we can go, let me see what we thought. Yeah, we thought Preciado would be the starter. And in game one and game three, he was. And in game two, Hurtado was. So that kind of gives strength to our conviction that the second game was more of a B team game. Hurtado getting some field time there and looks like the definite backup here. Onto the midfield, and we look at defensive midfielders. So we had Moises Caicedo, I always struggle with that name, as a definite candidate, and he was selected. Carlos Gruezo, the first of our likely candidates, was selected. So was João Ortiz, the other likely candidate. So everyone selected so far. We had a possible candidate in Alan Franco, and he was selected as well. And none of our others were selected. We had a possible but unlikely Jordi Alcivar, and then 4 players seemingly off the squad, and none of whom was selected. We'll go on to, well, the odd thing about Ecuador is that they had no players coded as central midfielders. All of these guys coded as defensive midfielders, but really playing the central midfield. In terms of starters, well, I just want to say in terms of formations that Ecuador went with a 4-2-3-1 formation in all 3 of those warm-up games. So looks like that will be their favorite formation going into the Cup. Now let's look at the players. We thought that we could only identify Moises Caicedo as a definite starter in part 1. And he did appear actually in games 1 and 3, so that kind of fits our narrative there. However, his partner, which was always changing in the lead up to the games, proved true again. In game 1, his partner was Ortiz, and in game 3, his partner was Gruedo. No, it wasn't. It was Franco. Alan Franco, the possible candidate. In the second game, the central midfield was Gruezo and Cifuentes. Cifuentes we did see coming back to play in the central midfield from time to time. Okay, so again, we would just again be confident about Moises Caicedo as a starter, but we wouldn't be brave enough to predict who his partner is going to be. On we go all the way to the attacking midfielders and the left attacking side. And here we had Jeremy Sarmiento. Okay, well, here we had no definite or likely candidates. So Jeremy Sarmiento was at the possible level. He was selected, though. Junior Sornosa also at the possible level, we knew was an injury doubt, and perhaps that injury got the better of him because he was not selected. We do have a new candidate here, though, and that is Janer Caruso. Not surprising given the lack of candidates over here. And Janer Caruso actually got his first cap for Ecuador in 2021. He's 29 years old with 4 caps and 1 goal. And he was a consideration for the World Cup 2022 squad. Or he was kind of around. He wasn't really much of a consideration. But he returned to the team after a more than 2-year absence for the warm-up games in June here and started one of their remaining 3 games and was on the bench for the other 2. So called in from out of the cold is Janer Caruso. And let's look at the left attack. Of course, we have a left attacking midfielder in the formation they use. And the first one is Minder is actually a right. Minda is a right winger, so an out of position player there in game 1. It was Caruso, our new candidate, in game 2, which we consider a B team game. And then Sarmiento in game 3. The candidate we considered most likely. However, we hadn't nominated a starter over here because things were too unclear. Let's see if it's a bit more clear on the right side. Certainly more candidates on the right side. We have 2 likely candidates here. The first is Kendry Paez. I'm quite excited to see him. He was selected. And Angel Mena also selected. The first of the possible candidates is Gonzalo Plata. He was not selected. However, the other 2 were John Yeboah and Alan Minda, who we saw starting on the left in the first game. Oops. Oh my goodness, my graphics have gone haywire on me here. John Yeboah then and Alan Minda, there we are. So let's look at the warm-up games. Who did we nominate? We nominated Kendry Paez, but not with great confidence as a likely starter here on the right side. And we have in the first game Franco, the central midfielder, the possible central midfielder, Alan Franco there. So that is a bit of a surprise. So 2 out of position players used in the first game. In the second game, we have Yeboah, who is a possible candidate here, and also Yeboah in the third game. So that's a good nod for him going into the cup, being used in the last 2 games. I don't know if we would quite kind of highlight him as a starter, but that is a bit of evidence. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I know what I'm trying to say. I just can't find the words to say them. But I think you know what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to move on to central attackers. Here we have Jose Cifuentes. Actually, we did see him in the central midfield. And actually, he, I don't know if we put him in the wrong place here or if he played as an attacking midfielder during the thing. For some reason, we have him as our likely attacking midfielder here. Anyway, Jose Cifuentes was selected, and nobody else here was. We only had possible but unlikely Jojan Julio, and he was not selected, and neither were either of the 2 players below that level. So just Jose Cifuentes playing in the central attack, but we saw in the 4-2-3-1 that they do use an attacker. So let's see who it was. In the first game, it was Kendry Páez. In the second game, it was Angel Mina, and in the third game, Kendry Páez again. So that is a vote in favor of Kendry Páez being a starter, and not surprising to see the other likely candidate, Angel Mina, there, even though they're both in the right wing position here. I think we did see some shifting in the attacking midfield. So there we have it, and we only have one category left, our forwards. And we had our likely candidate, Kevin Rodriguez, but as an injury doubt, it seems he was healthy enough at least to be selected for the squad. And he is selected. Our other likely candidate, Jordi Caicedo, also selected for the squad. We had Enner Valencia as a possible candidate. You'd have to go back to part one to get all the details on why, but no surprise he was selected for the squad, and we thought he would be. The other two possible candidates, though, Leonardo Campagna and Alan Obanda, not selected. Alan Obanda, due to illness, it seems, or we'll talk about that more in the end, but he was a concern there. And then seemingly off the squad, Michael Estrada may be a bit of a surprise because he was a starter in the World Cup there, but was a possible but unlike, or no, he was a seemingly off the squad player and he was not selected. So just Rodriguez, Caicedo, and Enner Valencia here. Let's look at see who started. And bit of a surprise in game one. It was left attacker Jeremy Sarmiento starting in that position. In the second game, it was Enner Valencia, who, given that he's selected, we would expect to be the starter. And looks like we get confirmation of that in game three because it was Enner Valencia there as well. So, yes, we would give our nod to Enner Valencia definitely there. Okay, that's the end of our run through the candidates. Let's basically go into summarizing in part three. So we'll begin with a list of surprise selections, notable non-selections. So I'll put Purvis Estupinan here, the right back, the left back. But really that's an injury issue, so we'll deal with it in the injury section. I just mentioned I'm a bit surprised Michael Estrada, not that he wasn't selected for the squad, but that he hasn't appeared for the squad since March 2023. He was seemingly off the squad, and that turns out to be the case. The other one is defensive midfielder Jegson Mendes. He's been part of their last three tournaments and was a starter in the World Cup in 2022. He's only 27 years old. But also not a surprise that he wasn't selected, but a surprise that he had not appeared for the squad since March 2023, kind of giving us the heads up that he wouldn't be selected, and he wasn't. Surprise inclusions, well, we saw the goalkeeper situation. Moises Ramirez had been possible but unlikely, but got the nod ahead of the possible candidate there. Two central defenders, possible but unlikely, Joel Ordonez, although we decided that wasn't really a surprise after all. But the second one, Jackson Poroso, was a surprise because he hadn't appeared since the 2022 World Cup. New players, we have three of them. First one, Jana Cardozo, a left winger. Second one, Andres Mikolta, a central defender, and the third one, Leon Lour, a left back. All three of those joining the team. And then we finish with an update on injuries here. So we do have a couple of players recovered from injury. Yeah, we do have a couple. Just one in this first category, Kevin Rodriguez. Well, we're going to remove this category of an injury doubt, but still on the roster, because frankly, we don't know any player recovered from injury may not have fully recovered, and we see that all the time, that they're named to the squad in hopes that they'll recover. That may be the case with Kevin Rodriguez, but he was named to the squad. Dropped due to injury, of course, Purvis Estupiñán, the left back who would have been a definite candidate. He was out with the recurrence of a muscle injury since late April, and not expected back until June 30th. So the medics turned out to be right there. At least that he wouldn't be fit for the game. I should mention Kevin Rodriguez's situation. He was out with a knee injury for the March games. He returned to club play and then suffered a muscle injury in mid-May, and his season ended with him that way, not being able to play. But as we saw, he recovered. He missed the first warm-up game, but he was on the bench for the other two. So yeah, I thought actually he had started, but he hadn't. So yeah, that actually may be an indication that he's not back to full fitness, because I would guess they would have tried him out if he was fit. Okay, then we have two players who are we don't know if they were not selected due to their injury, because they were not strong candidates anyway. Both of them were possible candidates. The first one, Junior Sornosa, the left attacker, there, out with a torn muscle bundle since mid-April and an unknown return date. So it looks like injury might have been the reason he wasn't selected, but again, just at the possible level. The other one is Alan Obanda, and he was out with pneumonia for the last match of the season on May 30th with an unknown return date. I thought he would have recovered in time for the Cup, but with pneumonia, it can range to being not serious to very serious. Obviously, his is a more serious case if he is prevented from joining this Cup, having it for more than 3 weeks there. So again, we don't know if Obanda, if his non-selection is due to that illness, or whether he would have been selected anyway. Okay, well, that is it for Ecuador, and we hope you feel updated and ready to watch them in the Cup, and enjoy the Cup, everyone. I'm just going to get the graphics in the right place before I actually turn off. There we go. We would like to thank Paul Udin and Pixabay for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast. The piece is called Victory Epic Music.